I think there's no question but that this is not going to result in a conviction because the test of a high crime or misdemeanor being committed has not been alleged, and as a result of that, there will not be a conviction.
Yeah, but what has been alleged is that you have Alejandro Mayorkas not actually doing his job, and as a result, it's led to a catastrophic situation at our southern border. I mean, we're in Texas. We're based in Texas. We have affiliates all along the southern border, all across the United States, and the stuff that we are hearing coming out of places like, McAllen, KURV, and everywhere else. I mean, it's a nightmare. I mean, when you have listeners that are and viewers of the simulcast that you're watching now, Channel 347, DirecTV, X, and elsewhere, that are reaching out to you and saying, yeah, I literally drove past like another makeshift processing center for illegal immigrants on my way home after I picked my kids up from school. I mean, that's literally what people have been telling us because it's so crazy at the southern border. And then they send like photos and video and everything else. It's a real problem. And this guy is not doing his job. And I'm not even going to get into the New York Times story where it's like, where are the 120-something thousand kids that were brought over illegally? I mean, actual kids, not 20-year-olds pretending to be kids, but like 12-year-olds, 10-year-olds that they can't even find anymore. The third-party contractors can't find anymore. I mean, it has been an absolute breakdown in law and order. He's been behind it. So if you're not doing your job, why are you in the position in the first place? So welcome back. Dana Loesch with you. Joining us now via Skype. One of the senators who's been in on this and has been watching this and been fighting for accountability from Wisconsin, Senator Ron Johnson. Senator, always a pleasure to have you. I wanted to get, so what is the latest? Because I know Chuck Schumer has been trying to table this whole thing. They don't want an impeachment of Mayorkas. He doesn't want the Senate to do its due diligence by the American citizen. And I'm curious as to if that's going to happen. Is he going to get what's the latest?
Well, Dana, unfortunately, the parliamentarian ruled that a tabling motion would be in order.
Wow.
We don't agree. She just, doing the bidding of the majority leader, I suppose. But, fortunately, a number of us contacted Speaker Johnson. I don't think he was aware by delivering the articles of impeachment today at 5 o'clock would set up Schumer bringing this thing up Thursday at 1 o'clock. Now, historically, the Senate concludes its business, final vote about 1:45, and people fly home to their states. So that was going to allow Democrats to snuff this thing out in just a few hours. But we contacted the Speaker, and he's going to delay the delivery, so at least we can make the point, raise points of order. But, for example, I have the weekend to talk about what a catastrophe the open border policy of not only Biden, but Democrats in Congress, what a catastrophe that's been for our nation. There's nothing humane, by the way. They kept saying that Trump's closed border was inhumane. There's nothing humane about an open border policy that is facilitating the multi-billion-dollar business model of some of the most evil people on the planet, the human traffickers, the drug traffickers, the sex traffickers. How do you think these young women pay off their $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $10,000 human trafficking fee? You know how they do it. It's under the radar. The media's not reporting this. There are such human depredations occurring because of this open border policy. Again, nothing humane about it whatsoever. We need to talk about that. We should be discussing that on the floor of the Senate. It should be in the form of a trial. If we don't get that, at a minimum, we need to draw this thing out so we can talk about this catastrophe as much as possible.
I completely agree with you, Senator, on that. And this, talking about the tabling of Mayorkas' impeachment, we played this audio of your colleague, Senator Romney, saying that, well, it wasn't a high crime or a misdemeanor, so you can't really impeach. But not doing your job, though, does mean that you can, correct?
Well, first of all, Congress determines what a high crime and misdemeanor is. There's really no strong definition, so it is what we say it is. Now, do I expect a conviction in the Senate? No, because all the Democrats also want an open border. I can't emphasize that enough. This isn't just President Biden. It's not just Secretary Mayorkas. Every Democrat in Congress, virtually every Democrat, wants an open border. They caused this problem. They could solve this problem. We didn't need additional legislation. President Trump, with the weakened authority because of court decisions, but even with that weakened authority, he closed the border. President Biden, using that exact same presidential authority, opened it up. So he can close it if he wants to. He just doesn't want to.
And that's the whole point of it. I also think they don't want, talking with Senator Ron Johnson from Wisconsin, I also think that Democrats don't want that optic of actually having them vote against impeaching Mayorkas, vote against holding accountable one of the architects of this chaotic border situation, this deluge that's coming across, because their Democrat voters actually, I mean, when they're surveyed, they agreed with Republicans on the border. Democrats don't want to have that accountability play out in the press like that, I think.
Oh, absolutely. This is the last thing they want to talk about, because they know that Americans, by and large, support a closed border, a secure border, a sovereign nation. By the way, the only reason this is getting media attention at all, because Mayor Adams and Mayor Johnson in New York and Chicago, those sanctuary cities, realized that their sanctuary cities can't handle this massive inflow. It was destroying their cities. So they started speaking out about it, forcing the mainstream media, who'd been covering up for the Biden administration for years, forcing the mainstream media to finally start talking about this, reporting on it to a certain extent. And when more Americans learn of this, other than just watching the few conservative outlets that were covering this catastrophe, they pretty well got exactly what a problem this is and what it's going to be long term as well. So now it became a political issue. Democrats in Congress, by the way, they weren't negotiating for a border security measure that would actually secure the border. All they were looking for is political cover. And unfortunately, those secret negotiations that Mitch McConnell masterminded, to a certain extent, gave them that political cover. Hopefully not to the extent that they're hoping.
Yeah, I mean, this is a disaster. I wanted to ask you about this piece that ran in Daily Caller, where there are some sources saying that Speaker Johnson's handling of some of the Mayorkas impeachment evidence could maybe compromise this case. I don't know if you've seen that story or what you make of what those sources are alleging. But they're saying that these impeachment managers tasked with prosecuting this case, they're saying that it was ill-prepared evidence, et cetera. I mean, it seems like the evidence is pretty public, but maybe there's something I don't know, Senator.
Yeah, again, I don't know the specific case. I don't think Chuck Schumer is going to allow the House managers to make their case. So we all have to make it. We have to point out, forget the legalisms behind high crime or misdemeanor, or, whether Mayorkas, his dereliction of duty, his not upholding his oath of office to faithfully execute the laws, whether that rises to impeachment or not. Set that aside. The case we need to prosecute is what a disaster the open border policy is, how we're going to see the ramifications of this for years, if not decades in the future. This is not going to be something that America is going to overcome anytime soon.
Yeah, no, it's not, unfortunately. Talking with Senator Ron Johnson out of the beautiful state of Wisconsin. I wanted to ask you also, you came out, and pulling this up, this was on your website. You've demanded Health and Human Services Secretary Xavier Becerra. I'm amazed that the AG of California can be the Health and Human Services Secretary, knowing nothing about Health and Human Services, but okay. Turn over the unredacted records on the origin of the coronavirus, and for him to give a detailed explanation as to why they've ignored this legal request, this requirement to produce all of this information related to what they know about the origins. You still have not been satisfied on that request, correct?
No, not at all. It took a court order under a FOIA request to get the first 4,000 pages of the Fauci emails. Those, of course, were heavily redacted because the agencies can redact under FOIA requests, but Congress is not subject to those redactions. So as an accommodation, we narrowed our request down to 400 pages unredacted. As an accommodation to us, they allowed us to view those pages unredacted, 50 pages at a time in a reading room, couldn't take copies, could take notes. We've reviewed about 350 pages. Now it's been over a year that the remaining 50 pages, very heavily redacted, if not 100% redacted in many cases. That's where the incriminating evidence is. They will not provide those to us. Again, even though there's a law, 5 members of the Homeland Security Committee signed this, the agency shall turn over this information if we're requesting it, and they're not doing it because the executive branch, the administration, is just thumbs its nose at congressional requests. We've allowed our congressional oversight authority to atrophy, and that's a real shame.
Who do these people think that they work for, Senator? I mean, if they cannot redact this information from members of Congress, then why are they being allowed to get away from doing just that?
Because the executive branch has so much authority. Let's face it, Congress holds somebody in contempt of Congress, but if it's an administration official, they didn't prosecute Eric Holder, but they prosecuted Peter Navarro. So it ends up being completely partisan. Congress has very limited enforcement capabilities. What we have, we haven't used. Again, we've allowed it to atrophy. So administrations from both parties understand this, and they don't believe they're accountable to the American public. I mean, this is outrageous. I mean, for example, we've been requesting the analysis of the VAERS system that the health agencies said they were going to do. They say they've done it. They will not turn that over. We fund these agencies. We pay their salaries. We fund the studies. That is the information the American public deserves to have, and yet they still won't turn it over. So it is outrageous. I get passionate about this. I could not be more frustrated, but there's very little I can do, particularly in the minority where I don't have the subpoena power, and I really can't press using our other enforcement mechanisms.
This is everything that's at stake coming up in November, and especially even with a weakened majority in the House. I mean, if they had the will and the power, they could push to defund these agencies or at least, freeze their funding, something for there to be some sort of penalty to maybe incentivize them to work with you a little bit more, Senator. But my goodness, they're not able to marshal any kind of momentum in the House either with only a +1 majority now. So, I mean, really, until that changes, until the makeup of Congress changes, and until I think we get a little bit more political willpower with some of these elected officials, what I'm hearing is that we may never know.
No, we need strong conservatives to be elected in both the House and the Senate so that the members of the uniparty that are part of our conference are marginalized and conservatives can actually rule the roost here. Yeah. We don't have those majorities right now. We need them. Listen, I have a great deal of sympathy for the position. Speaker Johnson, I think he is a true conservative. I know he'd like to do things that he simply can't do because, again, he's got members of the uniparty that are happy to fund these agencies, that don't mind big government, that really aren't concerned about massive deficit spending. We have the same problem with Republicans in the Senate as well. So we need the public demanding fiscal responsibility and sanity. We need the public demanding that we stop plundering and mortgaging our kids' future. Right now, the public's really not demanding it.
Yeah, the public's not demanding it. Instead, they're getting distracted on all manner. Anytime Democrats want to distract them with the latest, Arizona Supreme Court ruling, whatever it is, then that's where Americans' attention will go. It's unbelievable. I share your frustration, Senator Ron Johnson. Always enjoy having you on. We have to have you back, and thank you for keeping us aware of this fight and the difficulty as well. We appreciate your time.
Stay well.